welcome to the LifeStar HazCom Hazardous Materials Orientation course. This presentation has been designed to help notify employees of their potential exposure to hazardous materials, how to identify hazardous materials, and what supplies are available for personal protection. We will also discuss who to notify if an employee has an accidental exposure. Please be courteous during this presentation and shut off all radios, pagers, and cell phones. This presentation will discuss identifying potential exposures, the 29 CFR 1910-1200, as well as what your employer responsibilities are to you, and what material is available for your review for your safety. The 29 CFR 1910-1200 is one of the most frequently cited OSHA standards. The standard discusses the need for hazardous communication education within the workforce. There are over 32 million workers that have the potential for exposure to one or more hazardous chemicals. With over 650,000 existing chemical products currently available, and more being introduced daily, it is imperative that all organizations have an effective method for communicating what current chemicals are being used and what you need to do to protect yourself. The 29 CFR 1910-1200 discusses hazard communication programs, container labeling, and the availability and use of material safety data sheets. The Hazard Communication or HazCom standard establishes uniform requirements to make sure that the hazards of all chemicals imported into, produced, or used in U.S. workplaces are evaluated, and that this hazard information is transmitted to affected employers and exposed employees. The HazCom standard is different from other OSHA health rules because it covers all hazard chemicals. The rule also incorporates a downstream flow of information, which means producers of chemicals have the primary responsibility for generating and disseminating information, whereas users of chemicals are employees. So with so many chemicals on the market, proper marking of containers is important. The 29 CFR 1910-1200 requires that all containers containing chemicals must be properly labeled with the names of the product, the manufacturer name, and any hazardous warnings. Most products come pre-labeled by the manufacturer and should not be transferred into another container unless the other container is properly marked. Spray bottles or any other containers can be used, but they must be properly marked with the name of the chemical, the hazards of the chemical, and the contact information for the manufacturer. Office workers who encounter hazardous chemicals only in isolated instances are not covered by the rule. OSHA considers most office products such as pens, pencils, adhesive tape to be exempt under the provisions of the rule. OSHA has stated intermittent or occasional use of copying machines does not result in coverage under the rule. However, if an employee handles the chemicals to service the machine or operates it for long periods of time, then the standard would apply. Hazardous chemicals are defined as any chemical which is a physical or health hazard. Employers are responsible for providing employees with the appropriate information to identify hazardous chemicals in the workplace, obtain or create MSDS sheets, and ensure the MSDS sheets are up to date and available for the employees. Employers are responsible for creating and implementing a HazCom program, including labels, MSDS sheets, and employee training. Employers are also required to communicate all hazard communications through the available labels, MSDS forms, and formal training programs. Chemical manufacturers and importers must review scientific evidence on the hazards of chemicals they produce or import and report findings to their employees and employers who distribute their products or use their products. The 1910-1200 subsection E requires employers to have a written HazCom program. This program is to be placed in writing so that employees can review the program requirements whenever. Employers are also required to describe how they will inform employees of the hazards of non-routine tasks and the hazards associated with chemicals in unlabeled containers. The 1910-1200 subsection F requires that chemical manufacturers and importers must convey the hazard information to downstream employers by means of labels on containers and material safety data sheets. Languages used on the warning labels do not have to be identical to that on the MSDS. Manufacturers are required to provide a label which identifies the chemical, provides appropriate hazardous warnings, as well as the name, address, and contact information of the responsible manufacturer. Exemptions to the requirement for container labeling can include posting signs and placards that convey hazard information if there are a number of stationary containers within a work area with similar contents and hazards. You are not required to label a portable container into which hazardous chemicals are transferred from a labeled container and are intended only for the immediate use of the employee who is making the transfer. Again, chemicals cannot be stored in portable containers without proper labels. Pipes or piping systems, an engine, fuel tanks, or other operating systems in a vehicle are not considered to be containers. Chemical manufacturers and importers must develop MSDSs for each hazardous chemical they produce or import, and must provide the MSDS at the time of initial shipment to downstream distributor or user. Distributors must also ensure downstream employers are similarly provided an MSDS. The MSDSs must be updated by chemical manufacturers or importers within 3 months of information regarding the chemical's hazardous potential. OSHA does not require that MSDSs be provided to purchasers of household consumer products such as Windex or Whiteout, when the products are used in the workplace as the same manner that a consumer would use them, i.e. when the duration and frequency of use and therefore exposure is not greater than what the typical consumer would experience. Employees who are required to work with hazardous chemicals and graded properties of those hazardous chemicals. Material safety data sheets must be in English and include information regarding the specific chemical identity and common names. MSDSs must provide information about the physical and chemical characteristics, health effects, exposure limits, carcinogenics, and identification of the organization responsible for preparing the sheets. MSDS sheets must be readily accessible to employees in their work areas. One MSDS may apply to multiple complex mixtures having similar contents and hazards. For information regarding preparation of MSDSs, see ANSI Z 400.1 Hazardous Institutional Chemicals and Material Safety Data Sheet Preparations. Please keep in mind, MSDS sheets are not all the same. If you have any questions about an MSDS sheet that you are reviewing, please see your local safety officer. All employees must be informed of the HazCom standards and its requirements, operations in their work areas where hazardous chemicals are present, the location and availability of written hazard evaluation procedures, communication program, lists of hazardous chemicals, and the required MSDS sheets. Each operation has MSDS sheets located in a separate binder. These binders are generally yellow in color and are well marked. MSDS sheets are provided by the manufacturer and are required to be placed in the MSDS binder prior to any chemicals being used. There are various locations where you will find chemicals at LifeStar Response. These include chemicals you will use to clean your ambulance, such as Decide wipes or bleach solutions, cleaning materials for the office, such as Windex, and of course various chemicals to operate the ambulance. Your access to chemicals used for the ambulance should be very limited, and it is not expected that you should have access to such chemicals. Chemicals used for advanced life support and critical care units are limited in access to only those providers who need access for patient care. This presentation is not meant to provide all of the material that you'll need to complete hazardous communications. Your local training officer should provide you with information on your local hazardous communication plan, as well as information about the location of your HazCom and MSDS manual. If you ever have any questions about any chemical